Thanks so much, and thank you all for joining. If you can introduce yourself in the chat, I'd love to see who is able to join today. So I'm seeing different kinds of professionals from different parts of the country. That's so wonderful. Thank you all for making the time to be here. So my name is Dana Flightman. I'm the Senior Training and Awareness Specialist at Spark, the Stalking Prevention Awareness and Resource Center. And as you hopefully know, January is Stalking Awareness Month, which is just a few short weeks away. And so today, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the resources that we offer to hopefully make it an easy lift for y'all to spread the word about National Stalking Awareness Month, which we call NSAM, and get people really informed and excited about this topic. And I just want to say at the top that, I think it can feel like everything has an awareness day, everything has an awareness month, and it's easy to be kind of jaded about that and feel like, oh, cool, and okay, another one, right? But with stalking in particular, there really is a lack of awareness both within our field and the general public about what stalking is. Stalking is a word people use casually. People kind of think they know what it is. Some of our most popular shows and movies feature stalking behavior, but even very basic information like what behaviors count as stalking? Is stalking a crime? And where can I go for help? This is not information that the majority of people in America have at this moment. So when you raise awareness on this issue, when you as a credible organization are talking about stalking as a serious issue, that might be the first time a victim or survivor is seeing their experience named and validated and saying, oh, I could get help for that. Because most folks really don't know. We always want to remember there is no national stalking hotline. There are few, if any, stalking crisis centers. So it really falls to folks like you who are often primarily focused on and have more resources around intimate partner violence or sexual violence to kind of add stalking on. And I'm not saying that's fair or easy, but it is really important because these survivors really have nowhere else to go and don't know who else should be talking about this. So, y'all are doing important work every day, absolutely. I know that no one here is only working on stalking, but I really hope that you'll see the value in highlighting this issue in January and beyond, and that we can give y'all some resources so that it's not too heavy a lift to do so. So Spark is funded by the Office on Violence Against Women. We are a technical assistance provider on stalking, which is a fancy way of saying that we're here to help the helpers and y'all are the helpers. So we have everything that we'll talk about today is on our website at stalkingawareness.org. And my colleague Emma is also here to send some direct links. But of course, and I'm sure I'll say this again today, it's always Stalking Awareness Month to us, right? And so it's always a good time to educate yourself and others and enhance your stalking response. So in January and all year round, we have practitioner guides. Those are broken out by discipline. So we have a section for victim services, for law enforcement, for campus professionals, for judicial officers, for prosecution, and so on. And that guidance ranges from, one pagers with some really basic tips or an infographic, all the way up to, 20-page, very detailed guides on, say, considering stalking in your supervised visitation and exchange program. So really a wide range, a variety of resources at different depths. We have training modules. So if you're doing any kind of awareness education or your partners are on, say, consent or bystander, you want to be talking stalking as well. And so we have programs I'll highlight today that you can pick up and lead that already have scripts and videos and discussion questions and worksheets. We have victim resources, so we are not a direct service provider. So please don't send folks to Spark for anything other than information because when survivors contact us, we just have to be nice and send them back to local services so that does a disservice to everyone. But we do have resources that you can easily share with victims and survivors. For example, we have these brochures you can order from our website. Sorry, just disappearing in the blue here on understanding stalking. We have these in English and Spanish. You can put your local information here. And so if you have something to hand your survivor of domestic violence, sexual assault, make sure you have something for your stalking survivor as well. We also have fact sheets, infographics, documentation logs, and handbooks in 10 different languages, and a lot more information on stalking. And webinars. So if after today you're like, I wish I could hear Dana talk even more, You are in luck because we have an archive of webinars and we're called Spark. So I got us to call it the Sparchives. So that was like the height of my career. So you can check us out on the Sparchives anytime to learn more about stalking and sign up for our newsletter. As an anti-stalking organization, we will not contact you excessively or without your consent. So you have to actually opt into our newsletter, and it's one we send around quarterly. It's not one of those you're getting all the time. So I hope that you will connect with us there and on social media. That's really the easiest way to follow us and also just to share some of the content we'll be posting next month and beyond. We're there at Follow Us Legally. If you get our sick sense of humor at Spark, we will not be scared. We want you to follow us. And just, it's a great way to keep stalking top of mind year round. So before we get into kind of the resources, I'm just curious for folks joining today what you've done in the past. So I'd love to hear more detail in the chat, but if you can just let me know, how do you describe your organization's past levels of NSAM, National Stalking Awareness Month activity? You're thinking like, oh yeah, we don't really do that, or I just learned it was a thing, or we do a post or two, or maybe we do, we table or something, or ooh, we are all over it every day all January long. So I'll give you a few more seconds to fill that out. I'm going to close it in three, two, one. Okay, great. So it looks like a spread. We have a few folks saying we were all over it, and that's wonderful. We love to hear it. We love to see it. Please share in the chat some of the ideas and the great things you've been doing. Over half saying we do something, right? Like we acknowledge it. Maybe we could do a little bit more. And about a third saying, ooh, we don't, in the past, we have not really done anything. And so I'm glad to see that some folks are already, the majority of folks are already doing a something, and I hope this will give you some ideas to get involved and do even more this year than you have been doing. So thanks so much. And again, please do share your insights and ideas. All right, so I already spoke to this just a little bit, but just briefly, why does stalking awareness matter? Obviously, awareness does not solve stalking. It doesn't end stalking behavior, right, on its own, but it does have some really meaningful impacts. And the goals of our stalking awareness efforts are really for a couple different audiences. One are for people like the people on this call, our formal supports and responders, right? When someone walks into that space to receive services and or justice around whether it's on the victim service or the criminal justice end, does that person know about stalking? Are they taking it seriously? Do they have the tools and resources to best work with that victim or survivor and pursue justice, accountability, and safety? But we also have our survivors themselves and our informal supports. Of course, we know that most victims tell a friend or family member first. So, what does that person say? And so, again, while no, this doesn't solve all stalking, it has some very tangible things that we can do here with more awareness. It can help people identify stalking behavior. So, what does stalking even look like? When a lot of folks think stalking, they think surveillance. So, you often see imagery with the binoculars or a camera, but that's not the full scope of stalking behaviors. And people often don't name it stalking, even when it is. To reflect on your current response, both as a formal or informal support, like, how did I learn about stalking? What am I doing to help people who are experiencing that? What can I offer? What am I doing well? What can I do a little bit better? To dispel myths about stalking, I've already mentioned this a little bit, but folks are not a blank slate when it comes to stalking. They often have some sense that they know what it is, but it's often not accurate because there's very little formal education on stalking. And so people often think the stalker's a stranger versus someone they know. They might use the word stalking casually. They might not recognize that stalking's a crime, right? And so some very basic information can dispel those myths. To recognize the dangers and risks that stalking is quite serious and dangerous, to offer appropriate help and resources and or to know where to refer that victim or survivor. Where do they go for help? To validate their experiences and trauma. Stalking's a prevalent victimization, and a lot of survivors never see it named. They never see anyone really talk about it in any sort of official way. So, to really validate, hey, this happens, it's real, it's common, it's traumatic, and there are other people who experience this, and largely to affect cultural change in public discourse. When you think about our attitudes very broadly in the United States towards, say, domestic or sexual violence, they've evolved, right? They've evolved over the past 10, 20, 30 years. Not that there isn't more room to grow and more room for improvement there. Absolutely, there is. But the sense of domestic violence as a private or personal crime to no, this is a criminal act and people deserve to be protected and this deserves a criminal justice response, for example, or our conceptions around, say, marital rape, or, there's a lot of attitudinal change that's happened because ordinary people and professionals alike have said, this is real, this is a problem, we won't accept it anymore, something needs to be done. And I think stalking is a little bit behind those other issues in terms of that awareness and discourse. And so we all have a role to play in getting it there and really demanding the kind of change that we'd like to see. Speaking of those myths, this is one of the big ones that I think really plagues our efforts to help our survivors, and that's who looks like a stalker. Between these two, I'm going to go with Mr. Trenchcoat, right? And often, if you look for images of stalking, you'll see that kind of hooded figure with no face behind a computer, and it very much implies the idea of a stranger stalker. And when I talk about stalking outside of our field, because I'm fun at parties and stuff, most folks are like, oh, well, I bet you don't even usually know who's stalking you. That's a misperception I hear a lot, that it's often a stranger or anonymous person. And of course, that's not accurate. The vast majority of the time, victims know stalkers know victims. About 40% of the time, it's a current or former intimate partner. And a little over 40% of the time, it's an acquaintance. And so there are stranger stalkers, but it's less than a fifth of the time. And so the problem is you have victims saying things like, oh, that's not stalking, that's just my ex having a hard time getting over things, when that is actually what stalking often looks like. It's often people that at one point we've known or trusted. And I think there's increasing awareness around that. Around, say, sexual violence, where people understand, oh, it's not generally, while there is stranger rape, that creeper in the alley is not the majority of the perpetrators. That's true of stalking as well, but folks don't really know that. And it has some real impacts. One of them being that the majority of victims do not report or seek services. And I highlight this because so much of our work at Spark is in improving the response to stalking, right? That's our goal, is to give folks like you what you need and the support that you need and the training that you need to better recognize and respond to stalking. But we have to recognize most victims don't walk in the door. They don't seek the stalking response that you're offering because they don't recognize what's happening as stalking. And so this awareness and the response really go hand in hand. Absolutely, we want victims when they walk in the right door to have the best response possible, and we want them to walk in the door. And that's why that awareness matters so much. We know most do not report to law enforcement, and even fewer seek out victim services than go to law enforcement. And this is for a variety of reasons, right? Why people may not engage with victim services and or the criminal justice process. But some of that is because people who know they're offenders are scared, which makes sense because generally the closer a offender is or was to the victim, the more dangerous and violent they tend to be, or the more most threatening and violent they tend to be. So they're scared and they're less likely to report to the police than when stalked by a stranger. And when I see a stat like this, I think people are in their mind thinking the stalker is the stranger in a trench coat, not this person I know. So that's not stalking. Why would I call that in? Why would I seek help for that? Right. And that's something some very basic awareness and information can actually help to correct. And this misperception is not unique to our general public because non-specialist police officers share the same misperception, right? That sense that, oh, it's that stranger stalker. And I can just tell you anecdotally, I was talking to a stalking survivor who was stalked twice in her life, completely different, separate, just unlucky twice in her life and around this. And one time the stalker was an ex-husband, and one time it was a homeless man with mental health issues in her neighborhood. When do you think she got a more urgent response from law enforcement? It was when it was the homeless man, right? But when she was scared for her life, it was the ex-husband who was stalking her. And so this has real impacts on our response. If we look at why don't victims report to police, Not all of these can be solved with awareness, but some of them can. So I went ahead and starred some of the ones that I think awareness could help with. Some is that minimization of what's happening. Oh, it's not a big deal. I don't even know if it's a crime. It's probably not that important. Feeling that it's private or personal, right? The same kind of thinking that could plague our domestic and sexual violence reporting. Not clear a crime occurred. Is this a crime? What is this? What would it take? Or that feeling of shame and embarrassment. I don't want to make this a whole thing. I don't want to come out with this. And normalizing a conversation about stalking can help, increase this reporting and help seeking. And same with our victim services. It's pretty confusing where to go if you are a survivor of stalking, especially if the offender is a non-intimate partner stalker. Because if I'm being stalked by, say, an estranged friend or a neighbor, it's not very intuitive to Google like Family Justice Center and my county, right? Why would I do that? That's not what I'm experiencing. But that's actually where the folks like you often are that can help me. And so we want to be thinking about how are we reaching and serving all of our stalking survivors, and talking more about stalking, participating in Stalking Awareness Month can help them to find, oh, that's where I go, right? And receive those services. Of course, we know most survivors, like I already mentioned, they tell someone they know and trust. So, how does that person respond? Do they say, wow, that sounds really scary. Let's get you to some help and here's where you go? Or do they kind of roll their eyes and say, ugh, is it stalking or is it stalking? Right? And that can have a really chilling effect. So, this is about our public discourse around that stalking victimization. Speaking of that casual language, it's something that also impacts us here, right? You might have heard or said something like this. I'm totally stalking you on Insta. I saw your photos. And I'm certainly not saying the casual use of the word stalking causes stalking, right? It does not. But I do think it dilutes the seriousness of the term because then people are calling it stalking when it's not, and they're not calling it stalking what it is. And I would argue it's a bit unique to the word stalking at this point. No one's, oh man, that party was so lit. It's arson, right? If your friend tells you there was arson at my apartment, you're going to be like, there was arson? We got to call the police. There is freaking arson. But often, if you tell someone, hey, I think it might be stalking, you're likely to get, okay, is it really stalking though? Is it like stalking, right? And that can have a really chilling effect on if our victims continue to seek services. So I think this is a nice entry point when we're building awareness to talk about that. Okay, we've all heard the word. What does it really mean? Folks often ask me for alternatives, so I have some for you. Let's just say what we mean, right? If we're not talking about a pattern of behavior directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to feel fear and or suffer substantial emotional distress, we're not talking about stalking. So if it's about you had to send a follow-up email, say, sorry, I'm nagging you. Sorry to be bugging you again, right? If you're running into that person again, say, I hope you don't feel like I'm looking for you or I'm here too much. If it's you're obsessed with someone, I cannot stop thinking about those pictures you shared. I hope I'm not coming on too strong, but, right? Or if you're researching someone, you could even say creeping. At least that's vaguer than stalking, right? I met this person at a party, they seemed really cool, so I was kind of creeping on their Instagram to see what they're all about. Or I looked them up. Because these behaviors generally aren't scary, right? They're not scary, they're not really stalking. So let's call it what it is and not call it what it's not. We also see stalking represented in our media quite a bit, and that affects our public perception and our professional perception of what stalking looks like. And we have some programs that address this more directly. I did a webinar just on this topic a couple months ago, so I think it's a really fun one. But just kind of in short, we often see stalking shown as romantic, where our typically male protagonist will do anything to get the girl and they just keep trying, and usually that behavior is rewarded, right? And it's successful. Excuse me. But it's also often shown as funny. It's really a common trope in our cartoons and sitcoms to have that character that's, ugh, there they are again. They do not understand boundaries, right? They just keep popping up and it's played for laughs and there's no real harm shown. Or it's shown as heroic. You have, say, Batman's got to watch over the city so he can swoop in and save, Selena Kyle, whoever he's dating in that particular movie, comic, etc. And what do our stalkers say? They often say, I trust you, I don't trust the world around you. That's why I have to watch over you to keep you safe. It fits right into that sense of surveillance is love and that you stalk to protect. Or it's shown as edgy and sexy. It's, ooh, they really went there. I'm like, no, who else is going there? At least 1 in 5 women and 1 in 10 men because they are survivors of stalking victimization. I like to see stalking in a horror movie because I'm like, yeah, that's accurate. It's scary. I think it's a lot more harmful when we show it as harmless, romantic, funny. And no one piece of media is the problem. It's fine to what you like. My point is that this has a cumulative effect, and the cumulative effect is that it creates a fantasy of stalking that's not very realistic. Sorry, excuse me 1 second. In real life, of course, we know that stalking is criminal, traumatic, and dangerous, and that's what we want folks to understand about it. And so I bring all this up to say, and hopefully you might be like, Dana, I already cared about stalking awareness. That's why I'm on your webinar. I don't need to the hard sell. So I apologize if you feel that way. But I just want to acknowledge again that folks think they know what stalking is and they may not. And we need to meet people where they are and be really intentional in our awareness building that we're giving the right information and addressing some of those myths and misperceptions and recognizing that those myths and misperceptions, it's not a pedantic thing of being like, oh, you're wrong, right? It really has some real stakes in terms of safety and accountability. So what's going on this year for Stalking Awareness Month? Well, we're hoping that folks will spend some time to learn, to teach, to share, and to reflect. And all these resources are available in both English and Spanish. Feel free to ask if you're not sure in the chat, but just about everything is available in Spanish as well. So we want everyone to be getting this awareness. So without further ado, our materials for this year. If you're looking for ideas for what to do for NSAM, we have a to-do list with a few ideas from each of these categories. So feel free to check that out and be thinking, which of these might we want to do at my organization? To highlight a few options under each. For learning, there's a lot of opportunities to learn about stalking. Some are always available year round, and some are unique to Stalking Awareness Month. So we have 3 webinars coming up in January. These are free to register for, just like today's was, open to anyone who's interested in the field. And so we have one, we'll have several stalking survivors join us and speak out about their experiences and what they want responders to know and understand. And so that's on January 15th. It'll be facilitated by our director, Jennifer Landheis. So always a really moving and important one to hear from survivors in their own words. I'll be doing a webinar in collaboration with the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life on stalking in older adults. And then we also have our friends working on the at Just Tech at the National Resource Center for Cybercrimes talking about digital safety planning. So looking at some of the tech aspects of stalking and how can we better keep victims safe. And so I hope that you'll join us for some of those. If you're not able to join live though, good news, they'll be in the SPARchives. But as you're looking ahead to January, maybe having a lunch and learn where you have folks from your team get together and watch this together, for example, could be a nice NSAM event. We have so many resources year round that to learn more about stalking. Again, everything from safety strategies, coordinating the campus response, guides for different professionals, one-pagers, infographics, fact sheets. And so it's a great time to set aside a little bit of time maybe to learn, to see, what do they have for my discipline or for my partners? And let's take some time to see what's there and read it and do some learning. We also have these e-learning courses on stalking. These are available all the time, but it's a nice month to prioritize them. We have 3 right now. The first is what is stalking, then identifying stalking behaviors, and then stalking prevalence and relationships. These are short. They take 10 to 30 minutes each, depending how much you click around and absorb information. They all link out to lots of different resources. And I am biased, but I think as a stalking e-learning course goes, they're pretty fun. I made them so they're like a little weird. There's jokes in there. They're very interactive. There's a lot to click on and learn. And so I'd love to see an agency say, send this out to the staff and say, hey, send your certificate of completion. Maybe there'll be a raffle for everyone who completes all of them. Or if you have volunteers joining you, have them go through this. So it's really nice foundational information on stalking that's really helpful to know. And these really aren't that much of a time investment. And like I said, they're very interactive, lots of video, they move pretty quickly. So those are some opportunities to learn. We also have opportunities to teach. That could be by doing an in-person or online program where you're truly, like I am now talking, holding forth about stalking. But there's other ways to reach people as well. And so to speak to those kind of programs that we have, for any of our awareness educators, we have a great guide called Talking Stalking that includes lots of ideas as well as links to slides, etc., around, here are some activities you could do around stalking. Here's how you could integrate it into an existing program, as well as here are some standalone programs that you can lead just on this topic. So, for example, here's an activity that we suggest where you could have 3 sheets of, when I was young, we called it butcher paper. They might call it something else now, but have folks in 3 groups kind of brainstorm what might stalking look like, sound like, feel, and then have them switch. And so they'll have to get more creative as they go to the paper that's already been filled out and be getting into a little bit more and then to debrief this. And this has been a really powerful exercise because what folks often think of first is, oh, stalking looks like a camera and it sounds like someone saying I'm watching you and it feels bad, right? Which is true. But the more time you have to think, you realize, oh, stalking could also look like a love letter. Or it could look like flowers or something that might seem nice on the surface, but in the context of what's going on is actually quite scary. And same with that sound like, right? It could sound like a threat. It could sound like an implicit threat. It could sound really nice to an outsider. Or it could not sound like anything at all, right? Because someone's leaving notes or something like that. And what does it feel like? It's scary, but people might also feel guilty because they know that stalker and they feel responsible for their behavior. They might feel confused. They might, right? And so, again, it's the more you think about it, the more you recognize the diversity of stalking behaviors and experiences and think through the contextual nature of stalking. And so, this is a nice, fairly short activity that we found to be pretty effective. We also have discussion guides on every season of the TV show You on Netflix. And so we have one for each season individually, or now that the show is over, we have a combined one of just seasons 1 through 5. And so this has been really popular on campuses to do, say, show an episode of You and then let's talk about it, right? And this gives you all these questions and some suggested answers and talking points, etc. And like all of our media resources, we're not here to dunk on the media, right? We're not here to say the media is so bad. How could the show exist? Don't enjoy it. Our point is just, what can this teach us about real stalking victimization? What is it showing accurately? What is it not showing accurately? What messages is this sending us? Let's get into it. We also have a broader program on considering stalking in media. So, like that short spiel I gave about, oh, it can be, romantic, funny, heroic, edgy. We have a 4-minute video that goes through some examples of those tropes. That's kind of the centerpiece of this short program, and it will encourage your participants to think through some examples of stalking they've seen in media and some of those same questions from the U Guide, right? What messages is this sending us? Is this realistic? Is it not? And so we have this on our website with, slides, talking points, video, all of that good stuff so that you can just pick it up and lead it. Here's just a few that we saw last year because we were checking our socials quite a bit during Stalking Awareness Month. And so these are just some of the ads that we saw for some of the programs that we did that we inferred or could tell directly were using our materials. So I can't tell you how happy this makes us, like truly, to know that folks are using these in person to do this kind of programming. They're popular on campuses in particular, but it doesn't only have to be a campus, it could be any kind of community space to offer it. So, and we also have, I didn't highlight it here especially, but here you can see this public awareness campus workshop. And there's another public awareness, just the second one here, this lead a workshop. Those are standalone programs just on that kind of what is stalking, know it, name it, stop it. They both include a case study. So the general one talks about Peggy Clinky's story. The campus one has a campus example from survivor Caitlin Mathis. And so those can take an hour to 2 hours, depending how much time you spend on them and how much discussion you have. And those are just, if you want to do that kind of lunch and learn one off workshop, most traditionally, those are great to check out. And like this, they all have this, right? Videos, script, slides, everything that you need so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So those are some opportunities to teach, share, which related to teach, granted, but ways to just share that it is Stalking Awareness Month and that stalking is a serious thing. So one of the most popular ways to do that would be with our daily social media posts. And so on our website, we have every day a suggested media post and we have captions. And so you can use these, you can rewrite them if there's something that better meets the needs of your community or the point that you want to make or what have you. But again, we have a suggested for every single day what to post, and we have these in English and in Spanish, both the post and the captions. And looking through these, of course, we'd love to see you post every day, right? But if you're saying, ooh, I don't think my organization is going to do that, you might want to just choose a few that are most relevant to you. So, for example, actually, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Or will I? Let's see. Okay, so if you're seeing the website here, it's our landing page right now, are these resources, but if you get lost for whatever reason, you can go just right to Awareness Month, January 2026, and you can click here in Espanol to get to the Spanish resources. So here you're just seeing what I had screenshotted for you already, but I wanted to highlight with these. So again, we have them for every day. This is where you can download to see those captions that you might want to copy and paste. But if I was, say, a university, I might say, okay, I'm going to go with the stalking prevalence. I'm going to share most stalkers know their victims. And then maybe I want to share this one about how it affects young people in particular, right? And the campus resources. And maybe since our young folks are using so much tech, maybe I'll do the tech one as well. And I'm just going to spread those out throughout the month, right? Of course, every post is beautiful and worth a share. But just to say, this isn't an all or nothing. And for our medical spaces as well, we have some posts highlighting the impact of stalking on health, as well as resources for healthcare settings. And so perhaps you want to primarily share those or to highlight those, right? So do what's going to work best for your community. And we try to have sort of a mix of general facts, of survivor quotes, of highlighting resources, and with different kinds of information that would be relevant to different groups. All right, let me go back into the PowerPoint here. Okay. Ta-da. Okay. We also have these other ways to share these proclamations. So social media is powerful, it's great, use it, and it's not the only way. We have sample newsletter language, and those we have actually written different styles or different facts for different kinds of organizations. And so actually I will share the Word document here. So, I won't read this to you or anything, but this is what you can download from our website. We have a general one that just has, hey, it's National Stalking Awareness Month. Here's some things to think about. And then also, okay, if you're primarily, say, a sexual assault organization, okay, we're going to focus on the intersection of stalking and sexual violence, and those facts are kind of right there for you. Same for DV, for campuses, for medical, for criminal justice, etc. So, and if you're not seeing yourself represented here and you would like some sample language, let us know and we can write you something. But I just wanted to highlight that it's not necessarily a one size fits all. You can send what's going to make sense, and just including a little blurb in your newsletter can go a long way at getting people to realize, oh, this is a thing, right? And there are resources available, and I could learn a little bit more about that. We also have this letter to the editor. Here is an example. Of course, you can change this and put your own, quotes and information, mission statement here, but this is something that you can submit to get in local news and also spread the word about Stalking Awareness Month. And so that's available on our website. I know I keep saying that, but it's because it's true. It's available on our website as well. So yeah, then and proclamations that you can submit to local or state governments to proclaim it National Stalking Awareness Month. So here's a few articles we saw last year using some of our language and resources where folks, in local news, either on TV and or in print media, were letting folks know, hey, it's Stalking Awareness Month, interviewing some local organizations about what they offer for stalking victims and survivors and what that might look like. And so that's really great to see. We also saw several using our proclamation, New York State, state of North Dakota, as well as some counties. And so this just a few of them to show, folks really did use it and it really did work. And so that's really wonderful. We also have so many infographics and fact sheets for, especially though not uniquely our campuses, to do some kind of tabling event or to make sure that relevant organizations have these. So here's some pictures we saw last year of campuses tabling, for example, and we really give you everything you need to do this. Of course, share your local information as well. But for example, like here's a infographic here. I'll cover my face with it. Oh no, I disappeared. Okay. And so like infographics, fact sheets, the brochures you can order from us, put your local information, posters, etc. And so if people are walking by, and we love to see an activity there as well. And so we saw one campus where people would kind of sign, and we have pledges actually that you can sign that say, you'll take victims seriously and work to end stalking. So that's something a little more tangible you can have at those tables as well. And we know people love some swag, they love a sweet. So something that we thought of this year is you could do kind of a mini campaign, something that says, stalking is not sweet, and maybe hand out something that is, right? Candy or oranges or something like that to say, this is sweet, stalking is not, right? Could be a nice way to get people to your table to share a little bit more information. So all of these are great ways to just share a little bit, as well as to do even really low-hanging fruit like what I'm doing right now, using this background. This is on our website. You can download it, English and Spanish, so that when you're having a meeting with anyone internally, externally in January, they got the message. It's National Stalking Awareness Month. We also have signatures that you can put in your email, icons for your website, just little things to do so that this imagery and the word stalking is showing up in different spaces throughout the month. And then to reflect, right? Reflect on your response to stalking. So we have certificates of appreciation that you can offer to someone in your community doing great work around stalking awareness and response, because we of course often focus on the problems, right? We focus on more needs to be done, people are not getting the help they need, and all of that is true and valid. And at the same time, there's really wonderful work going on across the country. And so we have a couple ways we want to honor that. One is to give that a certificate to someone in your community who you think is worthy. We also annually present something called the Peggy Clinky Award. And so our past winners are Debbie Riddle and Anna Nassett. And we'll present that on, I think the 19th. Correct me if I'm wrong, Emma. And that is us giving a national award that we do annually to say, thank you to someone who's doing that work on a big scale. And so it's a great time to celebrate some of the strides and achievements and the great work that's happening on the ground. Of course, because this is about awareness, a lot of it is external facing, right? Let's put this on our website. Let's send the newsletter. Let's, share this on social. Let's send a letter to the editor. Let's do an interview. All of those kinds of things are great. But like I said right at the top, that internal reflection matters too, because I can just tell you anecdotally, I do training on stalking all across the country. It's only for professionals, the training that we do. And I usually start by asking, is this the first time you've had the opportunity to attend a training specifically on the topic of stalking? Usually after the whole room raises their hand. And so as a field, we have a way to go in enhancing our response as well, right? And to be being more aware about stalking every day. And so we do have these checklists on our website that you can use. We have one for campus, law enforcement, and for DV and SA organizations that just kind of help you to reflect on, what are we currently doing? What could we maybe do a little bit of better? And some of these are really low-hanging fruit, like questions, is the word stalking on your website? Do you have a little section on what is stalking? If you have one on what is DV, what is SA? Is it in your mission statement if it's part of your mission? And some of these are harder. Are we training all of our staff on stalking? And it's a great time to kind of take stock of that, no pun intended, and reach out to us or look at our website. Oh, we could do this better. Let's look at their screening questions. Or, ooh, we're not trained. Let's request a training, right? It can be a good time to just kind of center that in, say, a staff meeting. It could be a nice time to pull relevant records from the past year and discuss. For example, how many stalking survivors were served by your agency? And do you think that's reflective of the amount that there are in the community? Are you hearing from some folks and not other folks? Let's look at it locally, look at our state and or county. Lunch and Learn's always nice with a recorded or live webinar. I already mentioned we have a few coming up, but it's always a good time for my favorite context is key. That's our foundational session, but a lot of content in the Sparchives. And so to just get people together and listen together and discuss it, encourage staff to complete the e-learning modules, like I said, maybe a raffle or something for certificates of completion. Just say, hey, it's Stalking Awareness Month. We encourage you to do these different things or to honor someone doing great work. And I'm sure there's plenty more ideas as well. But, of course, we want to be doing that outward to our public activity. And we want to be thinking about, how can we take a moment this month to enhance our own response? Of course, Stalking Awareness Month is all year long, but something that we started just a couple of years ago that we're really proud of is the Day of Action for Stalking Awareness. This is the first ever, to our knowledge, single day centered around stalking awareness. And we have a campaign, the Sparkle Against Stalking campaign. So I think this short video explains it pretty well. So I'm just going to give this a play so you can learn more about it. So this video is available as well in English and Spanish to explain the campaign to folks that you're trying to get involved. I can tell you just personally that I know Debbie Riddle and she loves this campaign and feels that it's really meaningful in honoring her sister and raising awareness. So that's really wonderful to see. And here we won't watch the whole thing, but here's after we look certainly on that day to see who's posting and tagging and see all of that. And it's really wonderful to see folks around the country bringing the sparkle and having a good time with it. So we'll give this a quick watch. All right, so y'all get the idea. But again, it's a really nice activity that you can do in your campus or community. We like that it's certainly taking the issue of stalking seriously, but that it's also something joyful, that it's fun to be in front of a sparkly curtain or to get your, grumpy cops to wear some tinsel or something. There's something fun about that, but that also it's a photo that's going to get a lot of attention and that it is directing folks to learn more about stalking and directing folks to our website and to this whole month of awareness activities as well as educational resources. So that's in short what we have for Stalking Awareness Month. But like I already said, it's always Stalking Awareness Month to us at Spark. I also want to acknowledge for my campus folks on the call, I recognize that January can be a challenging month because students are gone and they're back, and some of you have most of January, where they're not on campus. So really, anytime you can do a stalking awareness activity is a good time. And you can also see January as maybe that's when you make the commitment to looking at your calendar for the coming year and scheduling in some different kinds of trainings and activities that maybe actually happen in April or October or whatever it might be. But regardless of what you do in January, we don't want it to be a one and done, right? Okay, we did Stalking Awareness Month. We're done. No more stalking all year. We'll talk about it next January because unfortunately, stalking is an issue that impacts people all year round. And so there's some easy ways to do that. One is to recognize that stalking so often intersects with other victimizations and affects every kind of population to highlight that on other awareness days and months. So in April, we're always going to be posting about the intersection of stalking and sexual violence. We'll have posts about it every week. We usually do a webinar where we talk about that intersection, right? And so in addition to whatever else you're sharing, just to share one or two of our posts about that and make that point and remind people, hey, stalking comes up here as well. So, same for Teen Dating Violence Month in February, we'll be talking about adolescent stalking as well as certain days. So, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, we'll talk about, hey, a lot of older folks are stalked, and here's some resources around that, etc. So, I hope that you'll keep stalking in mind throughout the year when you're looking to raise awareness, not in place of those other important issues, but to recognize that it intersects with them, and let's highlight those intersections year round. Now, if you do any kind of awareness education on, like I said earlier, bystander consent, you want to be talking stalking as well. And of course, we would love for you to do one of our standalone programs on stalking. We have a lot of them. We have the media one, we have our discussion guides, we have our kind of standalone programming, right? And that's wonderful to do in January or anytime. But I also recognize that may or may not be possible depending on where you're located, when you get access to the audience, etc. And so this is what I unofficially call my Sister Can You Spare a Slide campaign. And that's if you have time for just one slide on stalking, put this in there in your presentation on dating abuse or sexual violence, etc. And this is what it can say. And this is linked in that Talking Stalking Awareness Educator Guide. So let people know stalking is a pattern of behaviors. It's scary. Here's some examples of the behavior. It's usually someone you know. It can happen during or after a relationship. It's dangerous. Here's where to go for help. Just saying this at, say, the student orientation could go a long way in letting folks know, oh, this is one of those things that I could go to the office for in a way that right now is often not being mentioned, right? And it doesn't really add a lot of time to your presentation. Again, I am sympathetic to this because I used to do more awareness education on campuses, and I was told I had to talk about gender norms, bystander intervention, consent, enthusiastic consent, dating abuse. And then I also had to have group activities and a video and make it fun and not talk too much. And I had 1 hour. So if someone had come to me and said, but did you talk about stalking? I would have been like, shut your mouth. Okay, I'm not adding another kind of content to this and I will fight you. But I might have been able to do something like this, right? So if I'm talking about emotional abuse, let's just mention that some types of emotional abuse and or digital abuse are also stalking. So if somebody is doing things like contacting you excessively, following you, scaring you, that might be stalking. That's another kind of victimization that can intersect. And here's where you go for help. Okay, you can fill that in. So again, thinking about, of course, standalone on stalking is great, but let's also build it into our year-round work that we're doing around related issues. Now, when we're doing a public awareness campaign, which we have a guide for that as well, if you want to develop something more campus specific or community specific, we don't want to reinforce some of those tropes I talked about that are actually miseducating people about what stalking is. And so if you're advertising a stalking program, don't use imagery that reinforces misinformation about who stalkers are. So don't use that picture of the hooded faceless stranger, right? Or that lurker on a computer. What we recommend instead is to show stalking behaviors, show something like a camera facing the screen. And I know I do most of our graphic design at Spark, so I'm very empathetic to the reality that, when you're designing images, when you're making these kind of graphics, it's like you want to really quickly communicate the issue you're talking about. And so the easiest thing to do is to lean on the trope, right? Is to go to like faceless computer guy because that's what people are going to think, oh, stalking. But unfortunately, like I said, that is reinforcing some really inaccurate information. And so we try to give you some really practical, here's some other things we can do. Another that's one of my pet peeves, show fear realistically. Often when folks are shown scared, a couple things come up. You might see a real horror movie, kind of like in the corner scare that's very sensationalized, or you might see something kind of campy that's like this, that seems a little bit silly. And I don't think either of those are quite appropriate for most stalking materials. So if you're someone who does this kind of design, you might want to search for terms like serious or stressed or anxious, or look at the kind of images that we share. I'm certainly not saying we get this right 100% of the time either, but we try to be really thoughtful about showing what stalking really looks like and not just showing it as these kind of extreme sensational cases, because while those do and can and do occur, they're not the majority. And we want people to see themselves in our materials and to see that this training's relevant to them and what they might be experiencing. Whether it's in NSAM or anytime, we also have these ideas here for building awareness. So we have a playlist that is all songs normalizing stalking. This is like my pride and joy. So there's some bops on here for sure. We've seen places do karaoke events where they have participants sing some of the songs and then actually look at the lyrics and what they're saying. And again, the point is not to take these songs away from anyone, but just to show what are they normalizing or not. So this is also something I always play during my live training. So when people are trickling in or during a break, because it's kind of this background thing that gets people thinking, how is stalking normalized? So that can be a fun standalone, and then folks can bring up their own song suggestions and ideas and start brainstorming on their own too. We also have these short videos. And when I say short, I mean, I think the longest one is maybe 4 minutes. So they really are short, but give a lot of information about what is stalking, why is context so key, how can you help a friend? And so these are great to plop into a presentation, to just share on social, or however you might want to spread the word there. I already mentioned our brochures. We also have one that's not pictured here because it's so new, and that's for medical spaces. And so through our Vital Signs project, we are trying to reach more healthcare spaces and talk more about the health impacts of stalking. And so we also have a new brochure called Is Stalking Impacting Your Health? All of these are free in English and Spanish print brochures that you can order from our website. At this point, they may or may not get there before January, but put in that order. We'll see what we can do. We're a small shop, but we know y'all need these. And we send all over the States, as well as we've sent them to Guam, Puerto Rico, etc. And so, again, whether it's January or all year long, just having something like this that's tangible, that looks official, that you can hand folks, and you can put your local information here. We also have these posters you can order. One is more about domestic violence, that, hey, some of this is domestic violence and stalking, and others that kind of push back on that idea that stalking is cute or funny or harmless, right? That no, actually it's stalking. And so all of these are free on our website. This is something printable from our website in 10 different languages. We have a handbook that has just a little bit more information than what we could fit in this brochure. So just some very foundational, what is stalking? Who are stalkers? Where should I go to be safe? What might this look like? And so this is a great resource to start the conversation, to get people thinking about stalking in January and all year round. And all of this is, of course, available on our website. You know it, you love it, stalkingawareness.org, where we have practitioner guides, all the training models I talked about, the victim resources that you can share, and webinars. And with Awareness Month, our hope is to introduce the idea of stalking to more folks, or to introduce, I feel like that sounds wrong. Stalking has already been introduced to too many people, right? But to help folks experience stalking, identify, oh, that might be what's going on, to build that awareness that this is a serious victimization, and to give them that next step. In a social media post, we can't fix all the things, but we can start that conversation and get them to a website like your website or stalkingawareness.org that's going to have a lot more substantive and helpful and practical information and further learning, right? Where they can take that e-learning module, they can do a risk assessment, they can do something that is meaningful. And so even these things that seem kind of like a light touch, say the sparkle photo, can actually go a long way as an entry point to get driving people to more meaningful action, information, resources, and ultimately safety and justice. And so that's why they're so important. So I hope that you will connect with us and, look at the website, see all those things. I know Emma's been diligently sharing all the stuff, so thanks so much. Here's my contact information. If you have questions, if you have ideas, and also if you would like help with anything. So I've definitely looked at people's, they've said, here's how we talk about stalking. Is this quite right? Or, would you edit this? Or folks have said, we want to show a case, but we want it to reflect our student body. Do you have a case that shows someone of this certain age group or of this certain demographic, right? That we might be able to share. Or do you have media examples that might be powerful for this group, right? So we're happy to look at that and to share anything that we may or may not have. So you don't have to do it alone. Or if you're writing your own program, great. We'd love to take a look at it and offer any guidance that might be helpful. We very consistently get emails saying, I want to talk about stalking more, but I'm not sure how. Where do I start? And so, start with these resources. And if you want more guidance, definitely reach out to us and or request a training. We do training for professionals all year round, both in person and online, ranging from 90 minutes to multi-day. We're typically free of charge because we're funded to do this kind of training. So like I said, maybe January is the time when you talk to your staff and say, hey, I think we need to increase the priority of our stalking education this year. So let's request that training from Spark and get something on the calendar before next January, right? So that could be a meaningful thing to do as well. So with that, I will leave it open to questions. I see a couple came in, so I'm going to check those now. But if you have other questions or ideas to share, please go ahead and share them in the chat. And I hope that you will all have a wonderful holiday season and an excellent and loud stalking awareness month, and that you use these resources and others. Also, if you want to add your organization's logo to anything, we're fine with it. As you can see, everything's very public facing on our website. We want these to be used. And so adapt it how it works for you, and let's get the word out together. All right, I'm going to pull up the Q&A now.
Dana, there was actually a question in the chat that I don't believe made it into the Q&A that I just wanted to make sure you saw. Does any ideas on how survivors might best do advocacy if not currently linked with any local groups or organizations?
I think it depends what kind of advocacy that survivor wants to do. And so I would say definitely linking up with an organization is great because they'll have a better sense of what is needed and what opportunities there might be. So if it's, I want to share my story, okay, maybe let's work with that organization because survivor stories are really powerful. Maybe it's time to start getting that together, practicing it, talking to a victim advocate about what is safe to share or not safe to share, or what might be most resonant with certain audiences. And then, yeah, start going to local campuses and doing that, right? Or if it's, I want to change the laws, okay, that's different, right? So then we're going to want to talk to someone who is more of that advocacy focus. So it's kind of hard for me to say just as a survivor what to do because there's a lot of different things that you could do depending on what feels most meaningful, urgent, and best fits your or that survivor's, interests. But I do generally think, certainly everyone's entitled to tell their story, to make their own website, to share things. All of that is great, and people should do what they want. And connecting with an organization can be helpful because they can help that survivor do so in a way that is safe and effective, right? Because it's so hard for our stalking survivors because for so many of them, the stalking might be ongoing and or they might be afraid of being too public facing because that offender can come back. And so we just want to be really thoughtful about that with how people are putting themselves, in the world. And It's of course up to a survivor how they do or don't want to do that, but talking through that with a victim advocate can be helpful. So as an individual, certainly you can post about it, you can share your story, you can write, anyone can write a letter to the editor, anyone can order brochures and, ask your local agencies if they have them, etc. But I think that connection will hopefully be helpful. So I know that's kind of broad, but hopefully that gives you some starting points. Let's see. I'm just looking here at the Q&A. Someone asked, would legal-based advocates have the same approach with stalking awareness when it's not considered a domestic violence case? We have stalking cases that are not provided to special units such as domestic violence or special victims. I guess I'm not sure which approach you mean, but you're absolutely right. Actually, the majority of stalking cases are not intimate partner. A lot of them are, like 30-40% of cases are intimate partner related, but that means 60 to 70% are not intimate partner related. And so often those cases really fall through the cracks because as our general public, when they think about stalking, they think about this masked stranger. And when our field thinks about stalking, we tend to think about domestic violence, and those are only part of the picture, and we're kind of walking past each other, right? And so I think it's worth looking at, how are those cases handled? Who ends up investigating them? And do they have any specialized training or information around stalking, right? Or advocacy training around stalking, whether it's intimate partner or not. And if they don't, reach out to Spark because we can do that, because we definitely want all of our stalking victims and survivors to be getting the help and services they need. And I'll add too that if you receive any federal funding, you're required to serve all stalking survivors, intimate partner and non-intimate partner. And so in terms of promoting awareness, I think that what I just said is important information for people to know, right? That the stalker is often someone you know. It might be an intimate partner, it might not. And here's who could help with that. And the place you go for help might be primarily a domestic violence or sexual assault agency, even if the stalking's not related to domestic violence or sexual assault. And that's confusing to people. And so, you know, letting them know that, "Oh, actually, here's where you go, even if it's, say, an estranged neighbor." And I encourage you to share in your stalking awareness effort to share resources and statistics and examples of domestic violence related stalking and non-domestic violence related stalking, right? Avoiding that faceless stranger that's not accurate, but showing that acquaintance. It might be a colleague, it might be an estranged family member, it might be a person of authority, right? And kind of showing the diversity of stalking that can happen. And we have one of our posts next month is a chart that shows, kind of that breakdown of intimate partner, non-intimate partner, etc. And so something like that could be helpful. So I hope that answers your question. All right, and I see one more question here, and that said, these goals are helpful. If you had to pick one, which would it be? Which, fair enough. I think you're talking about these goals right at the top here. I know it's very stressful to watch someone flip through slides, so I'm sorry to do that to you. But these ones on top, hard to say. I think that to me, the goal would be to name stalking and to know where to go for help. And so our annual campaign, which is one that we inherited from the old Stalking Resource Center, the tagline is know it, name it, stop it. And that's intentional. I think it's a really wonderful tagline because that's what we want people to be doing around stalking. We want them to know what it is, to understand it, to name it when they see it, to not call it someone's being annoying or, oh, it's just, someone's harassing me or something else, but to actually say, oh, that's stalking. That's a real thing. It's a crime. It's a real victimization, and there's help available, right? And of course, to stop it, to seek help, to be able to achieve better safety, to achieve justice, to change our cultural discourse so that our bystander intervention, for example, includes more stalking interventions, right? So it's also that person saying, oh, you're texting them again? That's weird, right? All of that goes into this idea of stop it, as well as our criminal justice interventions and our address confidentiality. And, these are all different ways to contribute to stop stalking. And so I'd say if I had to narrow it down, I know it's three, not one, but I'd say it would come down to that know it, name it, stalking. What is stalking? Let's identify it. Let's do something about it. So those would be my priorities. right, any other questions folks have? Let's see if I missed anything. I got the ones in the Q&A. Is there anything else folks would like to add? Okay. I don't see anything here, so I won't keep y'all. It's rare for me to end early, so it's a big moment. So happy holidays to you. But again, thank you all so much. I know there's a lot of work to do, a lot of competing priorities, a lot of issues that need your awareness and attention. So truly thank you for the work that you do every day and for taking a little time today to learn more about stalking awareness and some of our tools and resources. Thank you so much, and please let us know what's missing so we can get it either for this year or if not, then for next year. So I hope that you will keep in touch with us. Have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you next month for Stalking Awareness Month.